We are only going to talk about one thing today on the show, which is the murder of Charlie Kirk and the conspiracy theories that have been formed around it. I'm going to lay out what I believe to be the clear and obvious and unassailable facts of the case and the conclusion that they inevitably lead to. I'll cover everything as best I can, and although I have long-standing personal friendships with key figures in this story, which makes things more complicated for me personally, I will be totally transparent and honest and say what I believe must be said. What happened 3 months ago, Charlie's brutal murder, and everything that's happened since, pains me, as it does many people, deeply on a personal level. And I'm doing my best to navigate it publicly and privately in a way consistent with my principles and in a way that might have a chance to make some kind of positive difference. Now, on the latter point, in terms of making a positive difference, I may be failing, but if I am, it's not for lack of trying, and that's the truth. You could choose to believe it or not. But enough about me, as this story is most certainly not about me, so let's get to the subject at hand, and I begin with this thought. A great deal of evil in the world can be described and has been described as banal. Happens constantly, often without us realizing it, without thrusting itself in our faces, and without making its perpetrators known to the world. Think of the routine executions that are conducted by the anonymous butchers working on behalf of Planned Parenthood or maid clinics in Canada. Think of the many fraud schemes that are currently being hatched by unknown Somalis in Minneapolis, or the crimes against humanity that are taking place as we speak across the globe in far-off African countries. Now, these are all horrific acts, but we also don't see them happening. We just know that they happen, and they happen so often that, to a certain extent, we take them for granted. And therefore, whether we realize it or not, we can discuss these evils with a certain clarity and calm. Now, the brutal murder of Charlie Kirk was not a banal act of evil. There was nothing routine or mundane about it. Footage of Charlie's public execution was beamed to hundreds of millions of people across the world. His death was far more gruesome than any depiction in a film could ever be, and it was streamed in far higher resolution than any other documented political assassination in the history of the world. Outside of military veterans, many of whom suffer for the rest of their lives because of what they've seen on the battlefield, it's highly unlikely that any of us had ever witnessed the devastating and immediate effects of a sniper shot to a man's neck. I know that I had never seen such a thing, and I certainly had never seen it happen to a friend. But whether you were a friend of Charlie or not, whether you agreed with his politics or not, the point is that you had never seen anything like that event. And then on September 10th, that changed. And what you saw, if you have a conscience at all, changed you. How do normal human beings respond when they're confronted against their will with a sight like that? Well, there's no playbook to follow. There's no precedent to guide us. There's no research or peer-reviewed study that can walk us through it. The honest answer is we have no idea. We figure it out as we go. And some have preferred not to talk about what happened. Others have spoken up as often as they possibly can. And we can now say with some certainty a very large number of people have concocted or come to believe highly incredible theories to explain Charlie's death. Theories that, if true, would defy any semblance of common sense and cause more international incidents than both world wars put together. These kinds of theories can, in many cases perhaps, plausibly be explained, at least in part, as a psychological defense mechanism, a way for many people who are effectively in a state of shock to make sense of something horrible and unprecedented. Conspiracy theories always pop up around tragedies of this sort. Think of the Sandy Hook theories, many other examples. And I believe this happens, and I've said many times, at least in part, because people are trying to take something ghastly and shocking and make it comprehensible by turning it into a kind of cinematic plotline. But over time, as we all know, shock wears off, and eventually the perpetrators of even the most grotesque acts of evil, through the passage of time and the arrival of more information, begin to remind us of the perpetrators of banal acts of evil, the ones we're all familiar with. Especially when they're caught, these killers lose the mystique that they had when they were on the run or when they were squirreled away in solitary confinement somewhere. The reason people still talk about Jack the Ripper while nobody knows the name Gary Ridgway anymore is that Ridgway was identified, arrested, and put on trial. There was a public catharsis. And when something like that happens, we have an opportunity to regain our senses, to understand the threat we face, and to proceed with clear heads and restrained emotions as we work to eliminate the threat and move on with our lives to the extent that it's possible for us to do so. Yesterday, just over 3 months after Charlie Kirk was murdered, one of those moments of public catharsis took place in a courtroom in Utah. The man alleged to be responsible for Charlie's death, Tyler Robinson, appeared in person in court for the first time since the assassination. And note that I say the word alleged only in the journalistic sense that we traditionally use it to describe accused criminals before they're convicted in a court of law. But in reality, from my point of view, Tyler Robinson is not just alleged to be the killer. He is the killer. His guilt is plain as day. And I will explain why in a moment. Now, during his appearance, Robinson repeatedly grinned and smiled as if he was enjoying himself. This is a man who has clearly benefited from the many fanciful stories that have been told about Charlie's death. His expression is the demonic grin of a sociopath. It's a grin that we've seen from many other sociopaths over the years, from Luigi Mangione to Brian Koberger. It's familiar. And therefore, the images from the courtroom yesterday are not confounding or shocking. They're sobering. And they aren't particularly difficult to decode. Now, at the risk of understatement, this does not look like footage of a man who's being framed for murder or somebody who's terrified and confused. He looks a lot like many other narcissistic, sociopathic murderers who've been in the exact same position. You know, there's been a lot of conversation about vibes and feelings, people claiming that various figures involved in this saga give off bad vibes or give them a weird feeling. Needless to say, vibes and feelings do not constitute evidence of anything. But it's worth asking anyway. What kind of vibe does Tyler Robinson give off? Can anyone honestly say you get the vibe that this is an innocent man being railroaded by powerful forces involved in a global conspiracy? To say nothing of his parents, who certainly are not giving off the vibes of parents who know that their son is being used as a patsy for a crime he didn't commit. This footage should have the effect of focusing your mind and strengthening your resolve after 3 months of speculation and paranoia. It should also motivate you to evaluate, with as much precision and seriousness as possible, the strength of the case against Tyler Robinson. Justice in this case depends on it. And so does perhaps the survival of the conservative political movement, and therefore our country. So the time for wild theorizing is over. Now, of course, as we all know, Candace Owens has been by far the most prominent person to push alternative theories of the case. Candace has been my friend for many years now, but I strongly disagree with her theories about this case, and I've told her that in our private conversations. I won't and would never say anything about the content of those conversations, except that we've had them. But many millions of other people in the general public have come to believe these theories, and there are plenty of other people online who are pushing them, which means that there's a conversation to be had with the general public as well, which is what I want to do today. If you're in that camp, if you're someone who believes that Charlie's death was the result of some kind of vast conspiracy implicating foreign governments, our own government, TPUSA, I ask you to listen to what I have to say. I'm not going to insult or condemn you. I'm just going to tell you plainly that I think you're wrong and why. Guilt is established through evidence, and the evidence, all of the evidence, points in one direction, which isn't to say that there aren't unanswered questions, and it's not even to dismiss the possibility of a conspiracy. There may indeed be a conspiracy of sorts, but it's a conspiracy, if there is one, among left-wing militants in Utah. I'll get to all of that. I just ask that you listen, and we'll start with the evidence, and here it is. DNA recovered at the crime scene from a screwdriver as well as a towel that was wrapped around the rifle used in the shooting both match Tyler Robinson.